Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to this series where I go through different RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. In this one I'm going to be going through 3 tomes. The Tome of World Building by Matt Finch, the Tome of Essential Horrors Part 1, which is by Necromancer Games for Old School Essentials, and the Tome of Essential Horrors 2, which is also by Necromancer Games for Old School Essentials. All 3 tomes are great for DMs or GMs of any game system, although, as you can see, the Tome of Essential Horrors 1 and 2 are both designed for Old School Essentials, and they're both monster manuals. But there's a lot more to them than simply a monster manual, so I'm going to come back to those in a minute here. The first is the Tome of World Building. Now, this is the Tome of World Building 2, and it was just released. Now, I've reviewed the Tome of World Building 1 a long time ago on the channel, and even the one that I reviewed was an older edition of that first book. This is a update. It's a brand new one that just came out alongside the Nomicon. It was recently kickstarted, and I recently kickstarted both, although the Nomicon's not out yet. The Nomicon is basically, from what I can tell, it's going to be a book about naming. It's all about naming. But the Tome of World Building is 354 pages of fantastic world building advice, random tables, and just incredible art. It's not on every page. I would have preferred a little bit more art, I'll say that right now, but it's a minor complaint when you compare it against, well, there is a lot of good art in here, and also when you compare it against the massive amount of material in this book for GMs to run their games. It is just absolutely fantastic. One of the things that I love about this book, so what is it? It's essentially just a tool for GMs. Tons and tons of advice, tons and tons of tables for every aspect of your world. Cosmology, the geography, the cultures, the genre that you're going to do, the kinds of dungeons you're going to design, everything. It's a full, all-in-one book. Now, you're not going to be using this book cover to cover, probably. You're not going to be, I mean, you certainly could, but I think most GMs are going to use this book as a reference and as an index, right? So you're going to come to this book when you need a particular kind of help, because in your game, you're really good at drawing maps, but you're really bad at creating deities. Or maybe you really need help coming up with the tags for a dungeon, and you just need like that kick to get yourself into that creative zone. That's what this book is for. It's not as gonzo and weird as something like the Book of Random Tables or whatever that book is called, the Dungeon Dozen, right? The Dungeon Dozen, part 1 or 2. It's not as gonzo and weird as that. You're not going to get the same sort of off-the-wall, wacky ideas, but it is really, really good for the nuts and bolts of a campaign world, of a setting. There are a few pages in here that I saw and I was just like, this alone is worth the price of admission. I'm going to come to some of those as we go through. I'm not going to flip through the whole thing as it's 354 pages. It just wouldn't be enough time, especially with the Tome of Essential Horrors 1 and 2 that I also want to go through. But here is the book. Now in PDF, these are all hyperlinked, which is great. You have a brief introduction, and then you have how to use this book, and that's really, really good. And then you have an entire section, just a couple pages though, but a full section on genres and approaches to those genres. And that is so good. Good practical advice for how to think about these different kind of, I would say, mainstream kinds of fantasy. Sword and sorcery, heavy metal, grim and gritty, high fantasy, and then the question of high magic versus low magic. One of the best parts of this book is the number of creatures. I love it, right? An empire of carapaces, the bug empire, empire of fungus people, an empire of the fae, meddlesome evil cults, unusual lycanthropy, ruins of prehuman civilization. Just so many good things in here. Genies and other elementals, great wizards and bizarre technology. Tons and tons of random tables in this book, and again, you can just see it goes on and on and on and on. I'm going to go back really quickly so you can see the major chapter headings. So you have introductions, you have cosmic matters, that's chapter 2. Chapter 3 is the world, broadly speaking. Chapter 4, broad brushstroke details for the other continents, right? So you're building the world, and then you build the other continents in broad strokes, and then you come to your particular home continent, the cultural basins of your home continent. That's chapter 5, what's it like there? And all the different ideas for culture and politics and government there. Then you go zoom in a little bit further, chapter 6, countries in that home continent. So you have the cultures, then you have the countries. Then within that, you have terrain and borders and kinds of ideas for different kinds of terrain and borders, different kinds of geography within that world. Illuminarchies, types of illuminarchies. Ancestral group, criminal guilds, expanded guilds, foreign empires, order of knighthoods. What are the different factions within your society? Then you get chapter 9, legendary locations, chapter 10, cities and settlements, chapter 11, deities and religions. We've still got a lot to go. Still got a lot to go. Chapter 12 is personalities, so NPCs. Chapter 13, mythical items and places. Chapter 14, monstrous leaders. And then chapter 15, useful facts. I love that section on useful facts at the very end, along with a checklist, indexes, and a list of the tables at the very end of the book. So fantastic organization as you kind of zoom in to a particular area, right? So you start very big with cosmology at the very top, and then you go down into the world, then you go to the continent, then you go to your home continent, then you go to the cultures and the countries, and then the cities, and then the people, and then the monsters, right? So you go all the way down into the very NPCs and items and places within your cities and regions. So super cool, and tons of random tables as you go through. Now there's a great kind of like tip or trick on how to use this book. Now one thing I find a little bit strange is, as you'll see through, there are these little bits of like these little tags on the side of the screen, the side of the page. Forbidden knowledge seen through the eyes of the bats, a parakeet, negotiations between the nobility and municipal leaders. I might have missed it, I didn't see an explanation for these. And they just seem to be kind of like random things that come from the book. They're not hyperlinked, they don't have page numbers next to them, so I honestly actually don't know what they are, except for just sort of like bits of kind of flavor or direct you to a particular idea or phrase. I guess that's it. It's just literally like page inspiration. So you look at it and you go, oh, that's kind of cool, a dead tyrant. Okay, annexation by trade, that's kind of a cool idea. Okay, forests, maybe I'll think about forests. Drug trafficking, right, charioteers, an invasion of lizard folk, manticores. I don't know exactly what the deal is with those, but it's cool. I like that it's there. I wish maybe it was like, I wish that there were like a hyperlink so that you could click on it and it would take you to a page that like detailed that. So you'd be like, ooh, I actually want to know about the High Chancellor being impeached. You click on it, maybe it'll take you to NPCs like High Chancellors or activities in cities or like politics or something. I wish it would do that, but you know, that's just a minor point. Here you have the descriptions of each of these kind of subgenres of fantasy. Sword and sorcery, grim and gritty, heavy metal, high fantasy, and then the question of low magic versus high magic. It's just 2 pages, but it's a great brief introduction, I would say, into these different genres. Here's some of the art that you get in this book. Really, really cool. Really, really awesome. Cosmic matters, some assumptions, questions to ask about your world as you're building it. Is there a creator deity? Or is there not? Is a hierarchy of gods or forces? Or not? Are the cosmic forces linked to alignment? Right? Is this a multiverse or a single universe? Right, this is great. These are great questions, great things to consider as you're going into the very high-level cosmology of your world. Not everybody builds a cosmology, right? A lot of people don't. They just start the dungeon. That's all you need, right? But pretty quickly, if you're going to play a long-term campaign, or if that little campaign turns into that little adventure turns into a big campaign, pretty quickly you start to need things like cosmology. And as you have added in things at the table, you start to put them together and you think, okay, how do these actually work together? A book like this is great in those sorts of situations. A great little section on the Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred, which is from H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos as well, or obviously. I love that. Okay, so here's just a random table for the legendary book, right? Because you're going to have a legendary book. What is the cosmology of the world? What's it written in, right? Is it the Bible? Is it the Quran? Is it, what is it? What is your Bible? What is your book that details the cosmos of the world, this ancient book? Is it holy? Is it blasphemous? Is it sacred? Is it lost? That's up to you, but here you go. Where is the book? What is the first word? All right, what is the second word? How do you say the word of this book? And then there are some stranger things than books on which your cosmology could be written. Right, that's a great idea. Maybe it's not written on a book. Maybe it's the secret rock of the Tarvo, or the ancient automaton of Dahara. That's kind of cool. What if there's this golem in your world who has the sacred texts of the creations of the world written on his various metal plates or stone tablets? Right? Maybe he's a golem that's the bearer of the origins of the cosmos, and he has to protect it, because to know the secret of the cosmos is to have power or something like that. And so he has to protect these plates by using them to battle against those who have come against him. And that means that they're kind of like gore stained now, right? And there's these, you build on that and suddenly you have an entire campaign or adventure, right? I think that's a great idea. Rivaled by space travel and extra reading materials for each of those 3. And then you just go through, and it's this idea how to do hexes, what kind of catastrophes you can go through. I mean, again, you can read this book bit by bit, and I think you'd be very happy reading through it. I got it in PDF. I'm kind of regretting not buying them in physical form. I think I'm going to try to get them in physical form, because this is the kind of book that I would read to go to sleep. at night, like before I go to bed. Like I would just get in bed, open up this book and read through it for a few chapters, a few pages, fall asleep, and then do it again the next night. And just do that for like a couple weeks or a few weeks and get through the whole book. That's kind of the way I read these sorts of books. And this is a fantastic, just tons and tons of good ideas as you're reading through. I think you could read through just these first 33 pages and you would go, man, I have 50 ideas for a campaign just off these first 30 pages. And the whole book is like that, right? We're 30 pages out of 354. Fantastic, fantastic tables throughout. I'm going to jump ahead and get to some of the later parts. Here's some arcane deities, antagonist deities. Tables for antagonist deities. So you roll, it's Cloud and Mist, right? Maybe he's actually a bug deity. And his, if you go back, what are his, his monster types, his ancestry, or his areas of power. That's what I should say, right? If he's an antagonist deity, what is his area of power? So maybe this guy's, you roll, it's the god of corruption and change, and his areas of power are nobility and lawyers. Or he is the god of filth and fire. Well, that's an interesting combo. And his areas of power are pride and weeds. That's kind of weird. But you can add them all together and or roll and re-roll, and there's some good advice about that, not treating what you roll as sacrosanct, right? Like being able to adjust what you roll on the fly. It's really good. If you're going to use a book of random tables, you cannot be wed to your roll. You have to be willing to say, nope, I don't like that, and roll again. Sometimes if you force yourself to stick with what you roll, you're going to get some very interesting worlds, but you have to be willing to be flexible. And if you're reading through and you're like, I rolled a 93, but actually I just saw 95 and that looks way cooler, go with 95, right? Like, that's what you should do. Rules for battle deities, craft deities, guardian deities, healer deities, leader deities, provider deities, right? You can build an entire complex pantheon, simple pantheon, whatever you want with these tables. Let's jump ahead again. And we'll go to, here's the personality traits tables. So I'm going to jump back here. Personalities. General personality traits. And you've got a D100, but you've got it divided into 3 columns. So, and each of them there's no doubling up. Each of these is singular. So you have a whole bunch of individual personality traits. Then you have a second set of personality traits. And you can roll again on any of these D100 3 tables for personality traits. Right? So you've got 600 personality traits right here. You can just roll really quickly. I mean, this does sort of the same thing that I love from, books like Knave or Maze Rats, but it's just like turned up to 11. It's just like way more. Some people might find that to be overwhelming. And I wouldn't blame you if you're like, I just don't know if I'll use all this, and so I don't know, therefore, if I'm going to dive into it. But I think, I don't know. Especially, I think right now it's on sale over at TTRPG. I think it's the GM's Day sale. It's like $15 for this whole book. Like, I think that's kind of a steal. I think regularly it's $25. I think that's still a steal. But, if you're not going to use it, if you're like, well, I just don't see this as the kind of thing that I use. I don't really like random tables. There's just so much kind of an embarrassment of riches here that I'll get lost in it. Well, then, yeah, I could see you definitely don't need this book. But man, if you have, if you're like me, a collector at all, if you do really like that process of world building, but you think you need a kick from time to time in your creativity, and you want just an exorbitant amount of random tables, ideas, bits of advice, again and again, and you look at these mythic armor weapon names, the greedy, then you roll a type, breastplate of Jatha the Igniter. Ooh, that's kind of a cool combo. You run the risk, if you do these template names, you run the risk of ending up with something that sounds a little bit like World of Warcraft magic items. I always remembered my favorite that I ran into in World of Warcraft, because it would do prefix, suffix magic items, right? One of the ones I ran into was the Imposing Pants of Power. It was my favorite, because it was imposing, which gave a set of stat boosts, and then of power, which gave a set of stat boosts. So the Imposing Pants of Power was the best that I ever ran across when I was playing the game. But anyway, you run into that sort of threat of like, okay, all of the magic items are named the same, template. So you got to mix it up, right? And obviously there are variations of these tables that you can mix it up, and you don't have to roll the same exact star type blank type of blank blank the blank. You can change it up and mix it up, and I would highly recommend that you do so. But it's a great starting point for your own ideas. And again, that's what this book is. It's a great starting point. It's a great kick in the pants. It's a great place to leap off of, especially if you're a little less interested in the wild, wacky gonzo. If you're really interested in that, then I think the Dungeon Dozen is your best bet. Both either Dungeon Dozen 1 or 2 or both. But if you prefer something a bit more grounded, a bit more real, a bit more like, something you can kind of see as all holding together from the beginning, then you could work from this book through from beginning to end, and you'd have an entire cosmos, an entire world, an entire continent made with magic items and cities and NPCs and factions and powers and all of this stuff. And I think that could be quite cool. Mythic tools. That's a cool idea. The planar anvil. That's a great idea. The planar anvil. I don't know what that does, but I think my players want it. Or I'm going to make my players want it. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. Well, anyway, I think you guys get the point of this book. The Tome of World Building 2, the Tome of World Building, and now I guess it's all that it's being called, but it's just the newest version of it. Fantastic. And if you have the first, now that's what I would say, if you have the first version already, then do you need this especially? Then I would say no. If you have the first version, if you have the first edition, if you're like me and you're a collector, yes, you want it, right? If you're like me and you want the updated tables, the more usable indexes, which it certainly has, it's certainly much more navigable than the first book was. I will admit the first book ended up not being used very much by me, simply because it wasn't terribly dexterous. I didn't have a great way of easily getting through it and getting to the table that I actually wanted. But this book is organized very, very, very well. A lot of attention has been paid to it, and that's what you need, right? For a book like this with hundreds of pages and hundreds of tables, you really need attention to that sort of detail and to ease of use. And I think this book is a lot better than the first version in that regard. So if you want that updated version, then I'd say check this one out, certainly. But if you're really happy with the first Tome of World Building and you're like, hey, I use it a bunch, I've gotten a lot of good use out of it, I still use it, and the tables, they're basically limitless in that book, then no, you don't need to double up and get this one. I still think it's awesome, and I'm super glad that I backed it, and I can't wait for the Nomicon, which is the naming book, which is kind of the dual set with it. Okay, so highly recommend you guys check this one out at least. See if you like it. And again, right now I think it's $15 on DTRPG, at least as long as the GM's day sales hold. I don't know how long that'll last, but at least as long as it holds, I think it's $15, and that's really good for this book. All right, the next is the Tome of Essential Horrors, and this is both part 1 and 2, and I'm going to go briefly through each. I'm just going to go through a few pages of each because I don't want this video to be too long, and also because once you see a few of these creatures, you get the sense of what the whole monster manual is like, and it's really cool. Now, a couple things first. I'm not a huge fan of the font choice, and I tend to not be a fan of kind of the fake paper look on books that don't have a proper font to fit with it. I don't know if it makes any sense. Like, I totally see a lot of people like it, and I get that. It's not my personal taste. I just don't like this kind of, if you're going to put like a fake parchment look, then the text should fit with a fake parchment look. Like, I'm thinking, if you guys remember the 3rd edition D&D and 3.5 D&D Player's Handbooks, DM's Guide, Monster Manuals, how those books had kind of parchment looks and it looked like an actual, in-world artifact, right? But the whole design and layout had been designed to make it look like they were a part of that. In other words, it wasn't just like parchment paper with modern text on it. It looked like, the title page of each chapter was kind of like really calligraphic, and the art was, sketchy and fit into the page like it was drawn on it. If you're going to do that kind of look, that's my preference. I'm not a huge fan of this. But when you look at the actual content of this book, and by the way, again, like I said, that's just my own personal preference. But when you look at the content of this book, it's so minor you can completely ignore that problem, that if you want to call it a problem. Because what you have are dozens and dozens and dozens of new monsters. As you can see, dozens and dozens of new monsters, all hyperlinked. Very happy about that. And then you get the description of the monster here with some special abilities, and then a quest or story hook to go with it for every monster in the book. That is so cool. So not only do you get your own ideas as you read through its description, as you read through its abilities, as you see the art, because again, there is art for every creature in this book, but you also get quests or ideas for quests to go along with each monster. That's so cool. This book is 184 pages, there's dozens of monsters in it, and you're looking at quests, and it's so cool. Now, Are you going to use these quests exactly as they're laid out here? You certainly could. I probably wouldn't. But as the baseline for an adventure with this creature, you read the creature and you say, how would I use this? Maybe you have good ideas and you don't need the quest. Awesome. But maybe you don't. And instead, you look at this and you go, man, that's a whole encounter right there. Maybe that's a whole campaign right there, based on some of the creature quests, and some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. Now, many of the creatures are things that we've seen in other monster manuals. Some of them are entirely new. Giant ants, for example. We see them in a lot of places, and you can probably find old school essential versions of giant ants. You wouldn't necessarily need these. But the Almirage, I've also seen them elsewhere. I don't know exactly where I've seen them, but I certainly have. Here's the antlion, the apparition, the arcanoplasm, the ascomoid, the astral shark, the axebeak. We've seen axebeaks elsewhere. Here's another point about the art. Some of the art is not my favorite. Some of the art is excellent. And it's kind of hit and miss, in my opinion. The Bake, an amazing piece of art. The Azer, an amazing piece of art. Banderlog is okay. The Barbgazai, it's okay. It's good. It's fine. It's actually I like the sketchy look to it. The Bloody Bones, gruesome. I like it. The Bog Mummy, I'm not such a fan of. So it's going to be kind of hit and miss as you go through this book. Some of them are really excellent. Some of them are just a little less, again. But that's going to depend upon your own taste for art style and all of that too. But anyway, the first book is awesome. I'm going to go back to the list of monsters in this book because you can see you go from the Afank, through the Almirage, the giant ant, the antlion, all of that, all the way through. You get drakes and dragons, genies, golems, a ton of golems in here as well. You get oozes, tons of oozes, lots of puddings, lots of amphibians, which are sort of like snake men, snake people. You get a greater Medusa instead of just the standard Medusa. Different kinds of Naga. A few different kinds of weirds, like blood weirds, fungus weirds, lava weirds, lightning weirds, well lurkers, a widow creeper. I'm going to jump to the trolls, because trolls are pretty awesome. So here are some trolls. You get the cave trolls, the ice trolls, the rock trolls, and the swamp trolls. I'm going to read through the swamp troll. I'm going to read through the whole page. It's so good. Swamp trolls are large, stocky, dark gray or brown, 7-foot tall, hunched humanoids weighing about 400 pounds. Large, upward curving fangs jut from their lower jaws. Their flesh is slick and slimy like moss. Swamp trolls make their lairs deep in swampland and marshes away from more settled areas, but not far enough away where they cannot hunt humans if game and other food runs scarce in the swamps. Okay, so you got some good notes there about how they are, where they're from. You get their stat block. You get a few of their special abilities like Surprise and Swamp Dependency. Swamp trolls need to keep their bodies covered in a thick coating of mud and swamp water or they suffocate after 10 hours. That's a great ability for the players to take advantage of, right? So whether they learn it themselves or they learn it from a sage or they learn it from a local hunter or from the old wise man on the hill, whatever, that's a thing they can use to defeat this particular creature. And I noticed that in the best kinds of monsters, right, where you have these optional abilities that in a D&D 5e fight wouldn't matter, because in a D&D 5e fight, for example, you're not going to fight for 10 hours, right? And in a D&D 5e fight, why would we want to suffocate the troll and not fight it? The whole point of the game is to have cool combat encounters. But in a game like Old School Essentials, in an old school game generally, if you can get around a fight like this by outsmarting the creature or by somehow getting it trapped out of its lair or out of the swamp or mud for 10 hours, then you don't have to fight the thing at all. So lots of cool ideas there for actually running this creature. And then you get the Troblin Feast, which is the quest associated with this particular creature. In the midst of a deep marsh of cool black water, white and yellow water lilies and cattails, there is a ruin of narrow raised walks constructed of black porous stone. These stone walkways are crumbling in spots and seem to lead to a central platform marked by a dozen basalt pillars in various states of decay. On the night of each new moon, a gang of 1d4+4 swamp trolls gathers at this place for a gruesome feast. The central platform is actually a pit carved from a single piece of basalt, and thus fairly watertight, although it is covered with a sheen of water, various mosses and lichens, and the odd jelly or ooze. The pit is about 10 feet deep and 40 feet in diameter with gently sloping walls. At each new moon, the trolls of the swamp gather here with dozens of goblin captives taken in the surrounding marshes and hills. The goblins are kept in crude wooden cages which are piled in the middle of the pit. At the proper moment, one swamp troll releases the goblins who quickly try to scurry away. The gathered swamp trolls waste no time in falling upon the creatures, tearing away their limbs and wolfing them down. The horribly injured creatures are allowed to writhe about in pain, still desperately trying to escape. Those that escape into the swamp are granted their freedom. Those that do not, but still live, are recaged and kept for the next midnight feast. So there's no quest here. And when I said quests earlier, this is what I'm talking about, this sort of thing. I'm not talking about World of Warcraft, go and kill 16 trolls and you will get this much money. I'm talking about really cool hooks, adventure hooks like this, right? There's this place in the marsh, this ruin, and now these trolls gather there. And now you know this, you can put this in your world. And are your players going to be really are they really going to care about goblins? Well, maybe not initially, but maybe if they need the goblins on their side. Well, now they need a way to deal with these swamp trolls, and that'll win the undying loyalty of the goblin tribes, at least for a short time, right? Until they forget or turn on you or whatever it might be. If you're playing a game like Shadowdark, where goblins are more, part of the established, groups of playable ancestries or races, well, then you might care more about the goblin tribes than if you're playing a game like OSC, where goblins are monstrous and, evil. Well, either way, this is a great hook. And you just put this in your map, right? You just put this location on your map. And maybe the players stumble across it during the day. And it's just this creepy place. And they're like, what is this? And maybe there are still some of these cages, right? Where the goblins are hanging out. And there are these oozes. And there's a sign of this horrible feast. But there's no actual trolls here. And so then later they have to come back. And they go, oh, that's what this was. Right? Or whatever. You could tie whatever you wanted to this hook. But it's this sort of thing that you see throughout this book. Over and over, you get great ideas for each of these creatures, but it's not exactly a quest. It's this hook. It's this idea of something you can add into your world. Okay, so that's the first Tome of Essential Horrors. Really cool. Highly recommend. But the second is better, in my opinion. I like them both, but I think the second is better. First of all, I think the layout, I think the art, I think the organization is better. The number of creatures in here that were just really cool, I thought was a lot better too. It has the same, not my preference style of fake or false parchment with, kind of modern lettering, but it's certainly clear to read, right? And I think that's something I should have pointed out too about the other one, is that it's clear to read. You're never going like, what does that say? Right? Clarity is absolutely first and foremost here. And I think most people probably are going to prefer that to a more artistic style or something like that. But you can see the creatures in here. You got the Aboleth, the animated armor, the Arcanix, the Archer Bush, the Azrai, assassin bugs, or the giant assassin bugs, tons of beetles, tons of bullets, or bullets. I always say bullet. More dragons, which is good. You want more dragons. The Chul is in here, different kinds of Chuls. You got different elementals, more goblins. You've got tons of great stuff in here. A bunch of mephits, sea serpents. You get the Varghouls, which we all know and love from 3rd edition D&D, at least I do. Tons of great stuff in here. And once again, you have the same idea, right? Where description of the creature, piece of art, all of its powers, and then hook for that creature into your world. And it goes for every single creature in here. The layout is a little bit less, it's not effective. For the most part, it's a creature to a page, but there's this kind of like shift, and it's often just slightly not quite a creature to a page, and that's fine. But it does mean that there's more flipping than I noticed in the other book. The other book tended to have things on more even, like you're only going to have one creature's description on a page, and it might spill off to the next, but then you're going to wait. This one does kind of just make the most of its space and just kind of pushes it together, which is totally fine, especially since it's all hyperlinked and it's alphabetical and it's pretty easy to navigate anyway. The Azrai, the giant assassin bugs, the Aturals, which are creepy creatures. I think they're kind of cool looking. They're like basilisks, but they're not quite the same. Venomous as opposed to petrifying, it seems like. The Bag of Teeth, the Basalt Hounds, the Basilisk, the Crimson Basilisk. Let me jump ahead to something like, actually here, let's just take something like a Doom Bat, which is just a bat. It's a giant black bat. Seems pretty simple, but I'm going to read through the page because it's a really cool description of this creature, and again, a hook for this thing. A Doom Bat is a giant black bat with glowing yellow eyes. It is a nocturnal hunter that desires living flesh to sustain it. The Doom Bat has a 10-foot wingspan, although specimens with wingspans reaching 25 feet have been reported. The approach of a Doom Bat can be heard long before the creature arrives, as its yipping grows louder as the creature draws closer. And you have the brief description of its stat block. You have its shriek and echolocation. Okay, Doom, the bell tolls. When the errant knight, in the scarlet tunic emblazoned with a golden sun, killed the old sage in the bell tower, things in the village began to improve. The rain stopped. The sun shone strong, and the animals, drawn and lean, fattened up almost immediately. The people became hale and healthy as well. The old bell tower, home of the curious sage who turned out to be a necromancer, was bricked up. All the people remember well the final curse on the necromancer's lips. When the next bell rings, doom will come from the skies. Large and small caves are in the gray peaks that loom over the lush meadow valley where the village is found. Nobody currently living in the village has ever ventured into these caves, for they are exceptionally difficult to reach. Stories report that they are barren and useless. The highest cavern is not completely barren, however, as it connects to much deeper tunnels and vaults wherein dwell many colonies of doom bats. Should the bell in the tower ever ring again, 1d4 plus 4 doom bats fly out of a cavern at nightfall to wreak the necromancer's final vengeance on the village. Left behind in that vault is a weird idol of spongy gray stone that is warm and pulses to the touch. The idol depicts a petty and forgotten god. It holds a large, perfect sapphire worth 2,500 gold pieces that serves as a mystic key to release that forgotten god from its extra-dimensional prison. All that must happen is for the sapphire to be bathed in the blood of an innocent and then shattered by a doom bat's shriek. So it's an interesting combination of several things. You have a few dungeons there, the bricked up old bell tower, the cave, and you have what might be going on in the old necromancer's lair, as well as this cave up in the hills. No quest exactly, and there's no like, the bell is rung and now the players have 5 minutes or 5 days to solve the problem. It's like, nope, this is the rumor, this is the fact. If the bell in the tower should ever ring again, well, maybe the players are, it's up to you how that affects your world, what kind of quest you build out of that, whether you just put it in as a oddity in the village, in your hex crawl. Right? There's just this town with a particularly scary bell tower. That's about it. Anyway, I think this is super cool, even for something like a doom bat, which you're like, okay, whatever. You get a cool hook like that. And I would say that all of the ones, when I just stop and pick one at random, I'm like, whoa, that's a really cool idea, even for a creature that I otherwise wouldn't necessarily think of as super cool, like a giant slicer beetle. I'll read this one, just the hook, because I think it's cool. And it's for a creature that, again, I wouldn't normally think of as a really awesome D&D creature, although it has a vorpal bite. That's kind of cool. But anyway, the Baron and his few subjects in Thistledown dwell in his little ancient stronghold on the craggy hill. They herd sheep, grow grains and bitter herbs, produce a fine, soft cheese from ewe milk, and do their best to discourage visitors. The Thistledowners, as they are called, are an insular people who follow the old traditions, including trials by ordeal. A deep pit in the Baron's Keep is the lair of a giant slicer beetle that the locals call the Sword of Justice. The slicer beetle is well fed on offal and straw, and therefore doesn't always attack when a criminal is dropped into the pit. Those being judged must stay in the pit for a number of minutes based on the severity of the crime they allegedly committed. They usually leave the pit intact, which proves their innocence, or having lost a limb. The limb is then roasted on a fire as a sacrifice to the goddess of justice, and the crime is duly forgotten. The Thistledowners dislike anyone approaching their keep, and they try to arrest heroes who think they can traipse all over their land. If necessary, the Thistledowners coax the giant slicer beetle out into the wild to deal with the intruders. That's a super cool idea. And if you don't like a giant beetle, just take that creature that's down there in the pit and replace it with whatever you want, because it's a great idea, period. But do use a giant slicer beetle. That's a great hook. And again, I just think it's crazy that all of these are awesome. I'll take that back. Not all of them are as incredible. But I haven't seen one that I was like, oh, that's lame. I mean, I haven't read through every one of them. I'll have to admit, in both of the books, I haven't read through all of them, so I can't say that I know they're all awesome. But the ones that I've read, I have been very impressed by. And just, it's really cool. These books are really, really cool. That's all I would say about them. So I highly recommend you guys check out both the Tome of Essential Horrors 2 and 1. Although, again, I think the second one is my favorite, just based on the kinds of creatures and the descriptions of the things that I read in there. The first is great, and I'm really glad I have both. But if you're going to pick one or the other, I might even say go with 2. But check the monster list and see if which one sounds better to you. So this has been the Tome of Essential Horrors 2, the Tome of Essential Horrors 1, both by Necromancer Games, and the Tome of World Building by Matt Finch. I'll put links below to where you can get them all. They're on Drive-Thru-RPG, and right now, again, as I said, the Tome of World Building is at least on sale. I don't know about the Tome of Essential Horrors. You can check the link, but the Tome of World Building is right now on sale as of the GM's Day sale. And it's for $15, so I highly recommend you guys get it. All right, guys, well, that'll do it for this video. Hope it's been interesting to you all, and I'll see you all in another one.